Up next, we have Monster Blood 2. So the book starts off two dream sequences in a row, which is a little disappointing, but eh, kind of interesting at the same time. I don't particularly like dream sequences unless they're kind of introduced as dream sequences, because then they're just fake out scares again. And I am not a fan of fake out scares. But if you open it up by saying, like, I had a scary dream or something, then I think that opens the gate for all sorts of scary happenings. When you just let the reader know beforehand that it's a dream, and you say all sorts of crazy things, rather than saying all those crazy things and saying, oh, none of it was real, by the way, I think that is a lot more effective. But yeah, it starts out with two dream sequences. Evan is in class and he's talking about the monster blood. His teacher gets so mad at him that he says, okay, you gotta clean up the hamster cage. He hates the hamster. And so then Andy comes to town with a can of monster blood, and she says, hey, let's get revenge. Let's get the monster blood and feed it to Cuddles, the hamster. Going back to Monster Blood 3, it's the same thing. Evan's life is miserable, and then Andy says, let's use the monster blood for revenge. And then Evan says, okay, even though he knows exactly what monster blood does, even though it gives him nightmares, even though all this crap happens, he agrees to it. And so in Monster Blood 2, yes, well, he doesn't agree to use it in Monster Blood 2. Andy kind of uses it in secret. And so Cuddles is just growing huge, huge. Then Evan figures the only way to stop the hamster is to eat the monster blood myself to get just as big as the hamster is. So he eats the monster blood and he grows to the size of Cuddles. And they're all duking it out. He's protecting the bully, Conan, which I was like, just let him die. But yeah, he fights Cuddles, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, they shrink back to their normal size. They look at the can of monster blood, which doesn't say anything on it, but it says something on it. It expires today. So to me, that was kind of a cop-out ending. It's like, it expires today. I didn't really care for it. And even though in Monster Blood, Evan is like traumatized by it, he still agrees, at least initially, to use the monster blood that he doesn't know how to stop. It just makes the whole book kind of stupid. That Evan knows exactly what he's getting into. He knows exactly what he's going to do. He knows exactly how scary it is. And he says, okay, whatever, let's do it. This book does have a few interesting characters, including Cuddles, actually. Cuddles, you almost root for him, though, by the end. So Cuddles the giant hamster, terrorizing the school. This book, it's not bad. It's not bad. It's kind of a little bit slow, and in fact, it's a lot slow. But for what it is, I suppose it's okay with the pacing. So overall, not too bad of a book. I didn't particularly care for it again. And now, next is Monster Blood. So yes, the synopsis sums it up pretty well. Evan goes and buys Monster Blood at a toy store, which I don't know why they would be selling something like this at a toy store. And so he meets a new friend, Andy, and they're all playing with it, having a good time. And they realize it doesn't fit in its can anymore. It's growing, and then they try to put it in a lot of different places. They try to put it in a bucket, they try to put it in a garbage bag, try to take it back to the toy store, and it's suddenly out of business. And they got to figure out how to stop it. And when they go back to their house, Evan's great aunt Catherine, she points at the cat, Sarah Beth. She says, it's all her fault. And then Sarah Beth, the cat, is actually a witch. She gets trapped in the monster blood, and then it kind of sucks her away. Meanwhile, with Evan, there's bullies that are, they actually like beat him up, and it goes into kind of descriptive detail about how much they beat him up. And so there are a lot of good moments to this. It's really, it's not a great book. I didn't really find it all that interesting of a concept. You have this goo that grows and grows. And when they say it has a monstrous appetite, kind of. I mean, they do portray it as threatening, and they do show that it can do some serious harm. And of course, there is the thing of what do we do? How do we stop this? There's that aspect of it that's pretty interesting. All in all, not very great. Up next is Don't Go to Sleep. So it's about this kid, Matt. He's the youngest in his family. His brother and his sister are really mean to him. Like, seriously, this is like the worst, most dysfunctional family ever in a Goosebumps book. So his sister, Pam, and his brother, Greg, all they do is torture him. And Matt, he just kind of wants to be left alone. He wants to do his own thing. So one day he asks his mom to have the guest room because the guest room is bigger than his room. She says no, and then he kind of goes like, "Well, screw you. I'm gonna sleep there anyway." And then he goes to sleep in the guest room, and then he falls into like this reality gap. And then he's being chased by these people who call themselves the reality police. So he wakes up, and then he finds that he goes to a different school, and his older siblings are now his younger siblings. There's one reality where he wakes up as like a circus performer, and he goes into the lion tamer's cage, and he wakes up as a monster one time. And so he keeps on going through these different realities, and the reality police say, no, the only way to stop this is to kill you, pretty much. They say, we need to put you to sleep forever. So yeah, kill you. They try to catch him. He escapes because he falls asleep again, and he wakes up as, I think, a squirrel, I think it was. And then like climbs out the window, and then he falls asleep again. He wakes up as himself, but bigger. He tries to climb back into his room because he found out with the reality police that there's a reality hole in the guest bedroom. So he's like, I gotta get back there. I gotta see if I can like jump back through that hole. He eventually does get back to being himself, and he does fall asleep in the guest room again, and then he wakes up and everything is fine. Again, kind of a cop-out climax there. And then the ending comes along with the twist of Nat's mom approaches him. She says, I've been thinking, it's your birthday and all. You're going to sleep in the guest room from now on. And so then that's the end of the book. I just want to hit it off the bat. The cover is fragging terrifying, and there is no scene like that in the book, which that alone is a real disappointment. The story itself is somewhat enjoyable, but it kind of rehashes itself. It does have some good moments, but not many. It might be an enjoyable read, but not necessarily a good one. I don't know if that really makes sense, but that's what I thought of it. Now up next is The Barking Ghost. So Cooper is a scaredy cat. His brother Mickey is a complete jerk. So he hears dogs late one night, and he decides to find out what they are. He goes out and he finds this girl. Her name is Fergie. She's all scaring him, and come to find out, it was all set up by his older brother Mickey. But then eventually two ghost dogs really do show up, or maybe ghost dogs. It's not really clear. But they try to lure Fergie and Cooper back to this tree, this changing tree, because they're people who have been trapped in the bodies of these dogs, and they can only escape by trading out with somebody else. So they say, we're going to trade Fergie and Cooper. So they go in, and they do get trapped in the dog's body, and then they're trying desperately to get their bodies back from these two thieves. Now for a book that R.L.Stine himself has all but disowned. Now what I'm going to say may sound pretty strange, especially considering some of the things that I've said about some of these other books. But I'm going to say it anyway. This book was awesome. until it tried to have a plot. The first two-thirds of this book were solid. They were amazing. They were filled with suspense, scariness, a fear of the unknown. It did virtually everything right. I can't really complain about much at all. But then along comes the part where the book tries to explain itself with this changing tree thing. And then it goes into, okay, well, maybe they're not ghosts at all. They're just people who found themselves in a bad situation, got trapped in the bodies of dogs because they were just walking by the wrong tree one day. And now here your brother is stuck as a chipmunk for the rest of his eternity. And this book tears itself apart. And honestly, it's really maddening because this is such a solid book for its first two-thirds. And to see it destroyed, it's just so sad. So sad. It had so much potential, and it ruined it all. Next, we have The Ghost Next Door. So this book centers around Hannah. The book opens up pretty strong. The book opens up with Hannah in a burning building, which is her house. And then she wakes up. It was a dream. And then suddenly, there's this kid. His name is Danny Anderson. I always called him Danderson. I just did. Because screw you. That's why. And so Hannah is always playing with this kid, Dan. Danny eventually gets involved with the wrong crowd. It's a little bit sad to see. Kind of in the middle end of the book, we find out that it's not Danny who's the ghost, it's Hannah. And this is really quite a dark scene for Goosebumps, because that fire that the book started out on, and she woke up, it wasn't a dream, it was a real fire that really killed her. And so she's been a ghost the entire book. Like, I really like that aspect of the book. It's really dark, but the majority of this book is just kind of boring. And then, it does get into Danderson when he goes off with his gangs and they start burning down this man's house because reasons. And then she goes in and she has to save Danderson. And then the ending of the book, she just goes away with her family, who also died in the same fire. Maybe my biggest problem with the book is she's followed by this black figure throughout the book. This black hooded figure, she doesn't know who he is, and it's always like calling out to her. And when she has to save Danderson from this fire, there's this figure saying, "Don't rescue him." And then he like pulls back his hood, and it's Danderson, kind of. And then it gets into kind of confusing stuff. Like, I really didn't know what was going on at this point. He says, once Danderson dies, then I'll take his place and he'll take my place. It doesn't make much sense to me. I think that I like this book just because that aspect of, the whole fire, and she woke up from a dream, and it turns out later that it actually wasn't a dream, that it was real. And I like that aspect of it. It's kind of dark. It's got some good moments to it, and the black figure, he's kind of scary in the context of the book. But then it's like he's a ghost that's not a ghost yet, or something. The book does about as good a job of explaining it as I am right now. Again, not a bad book, just not really a good one.